Well, hello there, it's me, Warren. Yes, add that Warren, the one who still lives in the house he bought in 1958 for the price of what you'd now pay for a decent used car or maybe a fancy golf cart. I'm not sure anymore. Everything's gotten so expensive. Listen, I've been watching American and real estate for over 6 decades now. And what I'm seeing reminds me of a man who keeps eating at an all-you-can-eat buffet even after his pants button has popped off. Sure, you can keep going. But should you? The answer is no. The answer is always no. Right now, the housing market has that same bloated feeling, except this time, the storm clouds are gathering in different places and for different reasons than 2008. And trust me, I remember 2008. That was about as fun as finding out your favorite steakhouse switched to veggie burgers. Here's a number that should make you spit out your morning coffee. 75% of American households, that's 100.6 million families, cannot afford the median priced home right now. Not won't buy, can't buy. There's a difference, and it's about the size of the Grand Canyon. The median home price sits at, in 4 to 59, 80-26 income. You know what that number reminds me of? The kind of price you'd expect to pay for something that comes with a butler and a moat. But no, that's just for a regular house now. Meanwhile, the median family income hovers around $114,200. Now, let me help you with the math, because apparently nobody else will. At today's 6% mortgage rates, you'd need to spend 47% of your gross income just on home ownership costs, not on living, not on eating, not on occasionally buying ice cream when you're sad about spending 47% of your income on a house, just on the house. That's not sustainable. That's not even ambitious. That's a crisis wearing a for sale sign. Now, here's what really concerns me, and I don't get concerned easily. I once sat through an entire weekend of board meetings without complaining. That's saying something. While the national headlines are busy talking about market stabilization, which is financial media speak for we have no idea what's happening. Specific cities are experiencing something entirely different. 91% of homes have lost value from their peaks. So Austin, 89% to Euler, Sacramento, 88% to 1,000, Phoenix, and Dallas. Both at 87%, these aren't small adjustments, like when you realize you put on a few pounds over the holidays. These are warning flares. These are sirens. These are your financially responsible friend grabbing you by the shoulders and saying, for the love of compound interest, don't do it. But the question isn't just which cities to avoid, though I'll get to that, don't worry. It's understanding why we're here, how to protect yourself, and most importantly, how to buy a home in 2026 without ending up eating ramen noodles until you're 97. Let me walk you through what I've learned. And I've learned a lot, mostly because I've been alive since the invention of television. Maybe not quite, but close. You know, back in 1958, I bought my home in Omaha for $31,500. Some folks thought I overpaid. My neighbor Harold said, Warren, you could have gotten that for $30,000 if you just waited a month. Well, Harold, that house is worth about $1.4 million today. That's a return of roughly 300%. Sounds impressive until you realize it's actually just tracking with broader market appreciation. Also, Harold bought a boat instead of a house and lived in his mother's basement until 1973. So maybe I shouldn't have been taking financial advice from Harold. My point, and I do have one, is that real estate has always been about fundamentals, what you pay versus what you earn. Today, those fundamentals are completely out of whack. They're so far out of whack that whack is a distant memory. Let me give you the numbers that would concern me if I weren't already financially comfortable enough to ignore most problems since February 2020, just before the pandemic hit and we all learned what Sordo starter meant. Home values have surged to 45.3% across the United States. Meanwhile, historically, home values grow about 4% annually. That means we've packed over a decade of typical appreciation into just 5 years. You know what else packs a decade of normal activity into 5 years? My doctor keeps telling me it's called stress. The housing market is basically having a stress-induced medical emergency, but everyone's acting like it's fine. Here's where it gets really troubling. And by trouble, I mean, even I'm impressed by how bad this is. Home prices have increased 197% since 2000. while median household incomes have only risen 40%. Think about that disparity for a moment. I'll wait. I won't wait because this is a script, but pretend I'm waiting. Houses are growing nearly 5 times faster than wages. In 2000, the typical American home cost about 4 times the median household income. Today, it's closer to 5 times in many markets. And in places like Los Angeles, it's 11 times median income. You know what else is 11 times something reasonable? The number of times I've had to explain to people why buying Bitcoin isn't the same as investing in companies that make actual products. But I digress. Let's talk about down payments, because this is where the dream really dies for many families. And I hate being the dream killer. I prefer being the guy who tells you to invest in index funds and then watches you get rich slowly. But here we are. A standard 20% down payment on that median home of or $459,826 is there the 91 or 965 or let that number marinate for a moment. That's the down payment, just the down payment. The permission slip to start paying for the house. In 2025, that down payment alone represents our 73% of the median household income. Nearly 3/4 of what a typical American family earns in an entire year before taxes, just to make the down payment. By comparison, in 2000, a 20% down payment represented 34% of median income. We've more than doubled the entry barrier. It's like they made the bouncer at the club twice as mean and then also added a cover charge and a 2-drink minimum. Now, let me tell you exactly which markets concern me most and, more importantly, why. Because it's not enough to know that Denver is seeing prices fall. You need to understand the underlying reasons that suggest the falls will continue, much like my hairline's relationship with gravity. Let's start with Florida, because that state represents everything that can go wrong when speculation meets structural problems. And then they have a baby named hurricane insurance crisis. Tampa leads the nation in overvaluation, with buyers paying a staggering 4.256 or 6% premium above what prices should be based on historical norms. That's not a premium. That's a mistake with a mortgage attached to it. But here's what really troubles me about Florida. And it's not just the humidity that makes my suit stick to me. It's the insurance crisis that's making these homes fundamentally unaffordable, even if prices drop. Homeowners insurance in Florida now averages their $6,350 per year, the highest in the nation, and roughly $4,000 above the national average. That's adding more than $500 to your monthly housing costs. You know what I could do with an extra $500 a month? Well, I could invest it in the S&P 500 and watch it grow. But apparently in Florida, you use it to protect yourself from hurricanes named after people who probably didn't ask for this honor. Between 2018 and 2023, Florida's insurance non-renewal rate jumped to 280%. That's not a typo, though I wish it were. Nearly 3.4% of policies were simply canceled by insurers in 2024. Why? Well, Hurricane Ian in 2022 caused over $100 billion in damages. Then Hurricane Milton in 2024 added billions more. At this rate, they're going to run out of names and start calling hurricanes things like Hurricane Please Stop and a Hurricane We get it already. Climate models suggest these intense storms will become more frequent, not less. And insurers, unlike politicians, don't deal in hopeful thinking. They deal in actuarial tables and probability models. Those models say Florida's coastline is becoming uninsurable at any reasonable price. So what happens? Homeowners get forced into Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, Florida's insurer of last resort. And let me tell you, last resort is never a phrase you want associated with your financial decisions. It's right up there with what could go wrong. And trust me. Now let's head west to California, where the housing market has always been expensive and the wildfires are free. Major insurers, State Farm, Allstate, Nationwide, have either stopped writing new homeowners policies in California or significantly reduced their exposure. That's like your doctor saying, you know what, I don't want to treat you anymore, you're too risky. That's not a good sign. The state's FAR plan, the insurer of last resort, there's that phrase again, has seen its exposure more than double in less than 2 years. From roughly $300 billion to over $650 billion from an investment standpoint, this creates enormous uncertainty. You might buy a home in an area that hasn't burned in 50 years, thinking you're safe, only to discover that climate change is making fire seasons longer and more intense. Your insurance premium could triple, or your policy could simply be non-renewed. Then you're stuck either going bare, which means risking total loss, or paying exorbitant rates through the FAR plan. The cities I'd specifically avoid in California, any foothill communities near forested areas, Paradise, say, which already burned in 2018 and really should have changed its name to not so much Paradise anymore, and anywhere in Southern California where water scarcity is becoming acute. Long-term water rights issues are going to constrain development and habitability in ways we're only beginning to understand. Kind of like how we're only beginning to understand that buying a house in a place with no water might be a bad idea. Moving on to the Sunbelt boom towns that saw speculative frenzies during the pandemic, as Austin, Texas is Exhibit A, and not in a good way. Home prices there surged over 40% between 2020 and 2022. Everyone wanted to move to Austin. Tech workers from California, remote employees from expensive northeastern cities, retirees looking for no state income tax and breakfast tacos. Now we're seeing the hangover, and it's the kind that makes you swear you'll never drink tequila again, except it's real estate instead of tequila. Barca, 89% of homes have lost value from their peaks. The average home has dropped 10-12% from 2022 highs. And here's the concerning part. Austin's economy, while strong, is heavily weighted toward tech. If we see a tech sector slowdown, and recent layoffs at major companies suggest that's happening, Austin's job market could weaken significantly. When that happens, those Tesla workers and Meta employees who moved for high-paying remote jobs might decide Austin isn't worth the heat and the property taxes. They'll sell and move somewhere cooler, both literally and economically, probably Portland or Seattle, where it rains enough to make you appreciate sunshine, but not enough to require fire insurance. Phoenix presents a similar story with an additional complication that nobody wants to talk about at dinner parties, is water. The Southwest is in a mega drought. Lake Mead, which provides much of the region's water, is at historically low levels. Maricopa County, where Phoenix is located, has been scrambling to secure long-term water rights. Home prices, Rick Pleck, pure speculation. The median home price jumped from around $3,000 to $50,000 in 2020 to over $500,000 by 2022, a 43% increase in 2 years. Now 87% of Phoenix homes are below their peak values, and I expect that trend to continue. Why? Because as climate change makes summers hotter, Phoenix already sees dozens of days above 110 degrees and water more scarce. The fundamental livability question becomes, why live here if you can live somewhere with moderate weather and abundant water? It's like choosing to live in an oven when you could live in a regular house. It doesn't make sense unless you're a pizza. If most markets are overpriced and some are downright dangerous, does that mean you should never buy? Absolutely not. It means you need to be smart about how, when, and where you buy. Let me share the principles I'd follow if I were buying today, which I'm not, because I already have a house and I'm 95 years old. Buy a house you can afford, not a house that looks good on Instagram. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. A house can be a nightmare if the buyer's eyes are bigger than his wallet. Our country's social goal should not be to put families into the house of their dreams, but rather to put them into a house they can afford and won't lose in a divorce or bankruptcy proceeding. Here's my rule. Your total monthly housing cost, including mortgage, property tax, insurance, utilities, and maintenance, should not exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. But honestly, I'd aim for 25% reserve. Why? Because life happens, jobs get lost, medical bills arrive, kids need braces. Your dog eats something expensive and requires emergency surgery. If you're stretching every dollar just to make your housing payment, you have zero margin for error. When I bought my current home in 1958, my wife Susan and I had a clear budget and we stuck to it. We bought below our means, and that discipline paid off immensely over the years. It gave us financial flexibility to invest in Berkshire Hathaway when opportunities arose. If we'd been house poor, stretching every dollar to make mortgage payments, I wouldn't have had capital available for investments. Same principle applies to you. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is fixating on living in a specific city or neighborhood because that's where they've always imagined themselves living, probably because of a TV show or a vacation they took once. But real estate is intensely local. 10 miles can make the difference between affordability and bankruptcy, sometimes 5 miles, sometimes just crossing the street. Look at the data as Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Oklahoma City consistently rank as the most affordable major metros for first-time buyers. These aren't glamorous cities, and they probably won't be featured in a romantic comedy anytime soon, but they have legitimate economies, decent schools, and home prices that haven't completely detached from local incomes like a balloon that escaped from a child's hand. In Pittsburgh, is around $225,000, less than half the national median. Median household income is about that $67,000. That ratio actually works. It's like finding a restaurant where the portions match. The price is rare, but it exists. So my advice, make a list of 10 to 15 metro areas where you'd be willing to live. Look at factors beyond just housing prices, job growth in your industry, quality of schools if you have kids, proximity to family, whether it snows too much. Then rank those cities by affordability. You might be surprised. Indianapolis has a thriving tech scene. Des Moines has excellent schools and a strong job market. Knoxville, Tennessee is seeing growth in manufacturing and healthcare. These aren't sexy choices, but they're smart choices, and smart is sexier than broke, trust me. I know this is counterintuitive. Americans have been conditioned to view home ownership as the pinnacle of financial success, right up there with having a good credit score and owning a riding lawnmower. But I've always looked at it more practically. A house is a place to live. If renting costs significantly less than owning, and you can invest the difference in productive assets like index funds, you'll likely come out ahead financially. Let me give you the math, because math doesn't lie. Unlike real estate agents, in many expensive markets, renting is currently about half the cost of owning when you include mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Say renting costs you $2,000 per month, while owning would cost $4,000. That's $2,000 per month you can save and invest. Over 10 years, assuming this annual return, the S&P 500's historical average, that $2,000 per month grows to about $411 an hour. Meanwhile, your friend who bought an equivalent home has built to equity, maybe $150,000 in principal payments and appreciation. But they've also spent all that time stressing about repairs, property taxes, and whether that weird noise in the attic is expensive or really expensive. I'm not saying renting is always better, but I am saying it's a viable option that too many people dismiss out of hand. If you're in San Francisco or New York or Los Angeles and can't afford a home without financial gymnastics, rent, build your wealth in the stock market. Wait for opportunities. You'll sleep better and your portfolio will likely thank you. The U.S. housing market in 2026 will not crash nationwide. Let me be clear about that before you start hoarding canned goods and gold coins. We're not seeing the conditions that led to 2008. Subprime lending has been curtailed. Lending standards are much tighter. Household equity is substantially higher. 45% of homes have no mortgage at all, and 62% have interest rates below 4%. These people aren't going to walk away from their homes just because prices decline modestly. They're going to hold on like I hold on to a good stock forever, or until something fundamentally changes. What we will see, what we're already seeing, is a tale of two markets. In supply-constrained areas with strong job growth and reasonable affordability, think parts of the Midwest. Some southeastern cities outside the boom-bust markets, prices will remain stable or grow modestly, maybe 2–3% annually. But in the markets I've highlighted, the pandemic boom towns, the disaster-prone coastlines, the speculation-driven metros, we're going to see continued price declines. Not 50 drops like 2008, but these 10–20% corrections from peak to trough spread out over 2 to 3 years. That's enough to wipe out the equity of anyone who bought near the peak with a small down payment. That's enough to make you wish you'd listened to that annoying friend who kept telling you to wait. The wild card is the insurance crisis. which I believe most analysts are underestimating because they're too busy looking at interest rates and inventory levels. If we see another major hurricane season in 2026 or catastrophic wildfires, insurance markets in Florida and California could go from stressed to failed. When homeowners can't get insurance at any price, they can't sell their homes to anyone who needs a mortgage because mortgage lenders require insurance. That's when you get a true liquidity crisis. Lots of sellers, no buyers, and prices that can fall much faster than any model predicts. My advice remains what it's always been: buy assets based on what they produce, not what you hope someone else will pay for them. A home produces shelter, stability, and if you're lucky, fond memories. It's not a lottery ticket. It's not a retirement plan. It's not going to make you rich. It's a place to live, preferably one that doesn't bankrupt you in the process. So if you're thinking about buying in 2026, ask yourself, 1, can I afford this home comfortably, assuming it doesn't appreciate at all? 2, can I handle a job loss for 6 months without defaulting? 3, will I be happy living here for 10+ years? If the answers are yes, then buy. But buy conservatively, buy in a fundamentally sound market, buy with your eyes wide open to the risks. If the answers are no, there's zero shame in waiting, in renting, in building wealth through other means. Some of the best investment decisions I've ever made were the ones I didn't make, the deals I walked away from because the price wasn't right. The housing market will always be there. Opportunities will always emerge. But financial ruin, that's permanent. Don't let social pressure or fear of missing out push you into a decision that could haunt you for decades. Don't let some real estate agent named Brad convince you that they're not making any more land, as if that's a reason to overpay for a house in Phoenix where there's plenty of land and not enough water. Look, I understand the emotional pull of home ownership. I've lived in the same house since 1958, and it's given my family 6-7 years of wonderful memories. But here's what I want you to understand. I bought that house for $31,500 when I could easily afford it. I didn't stretch. I didn't speculate. I didn't assume it would make me rich. I assumed it would keep the rain off my head and give me a place to read the newspaper in peace. The homes that will weather whatever comes in 2026 and beyond are the ones bought by people who did their homework, who understood the numbers, and who didn't confuse price with value. In too many markets right now, the price you're being asked to pay bears no relationship to the value you're receiving. It's like paying $50 for a hamburger. It's a hamburger, but it's not a $50 hamburger. There's no such thing as a $50 hamburger unless it comes with a side of poor judgment. So be patient, be disciplined, be willing to rent if buying doesn't make sense. And most importantly, be willing to walk away from markets where the fundamentals are broken. There are still places in America where you can buy a home that makes financial sense. Find one of those places. Your future self will thank you for the wisdom to wait for the right opportunity rather than rushing into the wrong one just because everyone else is doing it. And if everyone else is doing it, that's usually a good sign that you shouldn't be. Good luck out there. You're going to need it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a cherry Coke to drink and some annual reports to read.